Welcome to Planted, Finding Your Roots in STEM Careers. Journey with us as we navigate the winding path into tree and plant-related careers with professionals who have taken root or are still branching out. I'm Megan Wiesbrook.
And I'm Jessica Turner-Scoff. Working in STEM careers requires planning with a balance of creativity and realistic thinking. Joining us on the podcast today to discuss how you can use or you can develop the trait of vision in STEM careers are two leaders from the Morton Arboretum, Vice President of Education and Information, Sue Wagner, and Vice President of Science and Conservation, Nicole Cavender. We are so excited you guys are here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
So we're going to link together a couple things that have to do with both of you. And Sue, we'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about sea turtles, planetariums, and trolls so that our listeners can get to know you a bit before we jump into our topic for today?
Yes, I do have experience with sea turtles, a planetarium, and trolls. To start, I was a graduate student working on a special project to study hawksbill sea turtles in Barbados. I learned a lot about sea turtles, but what I really enjoyed learning about was how science works in real life. I was part of a team that studied the turtles' nesting and understood how a hypothesis became real through this kind of study. And then at the planetarium, I was at the Adler Planetarium as vice president there and was responsible for a lot of things there as well, including our shows and our exhibits and our programs, and had a wonderful time there creating experiences for visitors. And then last but not least, at the Morton Arboretum, we have the troll hunt. We have a series of trolls, about 6, who are about 20 to 30 feet tall, along with a troll hideout that help people understand our role as the guardian of trees and get people excited about coming to the Arboretum to learn just a little bit more about our mission and the work that we would like to invite everyone else to join us in doing.
Well, I'm so jealous of the sea turtles, and the trolls, for our listeners, are really incredible, a must-see. You should definitely go online and look up pictures. Now, Nicole, how do you link together fungi, yoga, and a plethora of pets?
Well, fungi, I still love fungi, but that was from my father, who's a mycologist, and I grew up tromping through the woods looking for small mushrooms and large ones, too. And, still I'm looking, for them right now because the morels are going to be coming out soon. And then, of course, yoga. Well, that was an interest before my college days even. I was, as a young adult, I was very interested in yoga, and I carry that practice with me today. And I feel that it really helps a lot with self-awareness. And, it's a nice thing to do throughout your life. And then the many, many pets. Well, I love animals. As a young person, I had, chickens and ducks and turkey and pigeons and rabbits. And even today, we have a lot of pets. But mostly, I love animals. And my love of animals has also led to my love of plants.
Wonderful. Well, we're excited to talk with you both and cannot wait to learn more about how the many responsibilities that each of you have how vision plays a role in some of that work.
Nicole, you said your dad was a fun guy. Oh, I know you've heard that a million times, and I'm pretty sure our listeners will stop listening as soon as I say that. But clearly, that's the experience that you had when you were a child, going out in the woods with him. But what other ways has that your childhood experiences spark that passion for science and the natural world?
I loved being outside as a kid, and I had a lot of exposure to it. And even, I have 2 sisters, the 3 of us. My dad would take us along with him to go collecting of these soils because he would study soils and look at the microorganisms that lived in the soil. They're called cellular slime molds, in case you're interested. But we were out in the field with them. We did all this hiking. I was in the garden a lot. I loved flowers. So that my childhood definitely has an influence in the career choice that I chose.
And Sue, what about you? I know we've talked, or you've given us some insight on some of the science experiences you got to have as a young adult or more closer to adulthood. But did your interest in science start earlier? What are some memorable experiences from childhood that you can link back to your interest in science?
Yes, I did have many early experiences focused on nature and education as well. One of my earliest memories was a Christmas gift I received. It was a large chalkboard that I proceeded to bring outside in the summer and use that chalkboard to teach kids in the neighborhood how to read, and that could mean reading science books. Anyway, the other thing I remember spending a lot of time on is really exploring the prairie that was nearby my house, and I became quite enamored with it and was I love the little tadpoles there. And so I decided to create this kind of a small exhibit by hand from pieces of wood and things I found around the house that were my dad's, and created this experience so that my friends in the neighborhood could see the environment in which the tadpoles lived. And I think I hit a point at about 5th or 6th grade where I realized science was something of great interest to me, and it was further supported by my uncle giving me a chemistry set and then a microscope for the holidays. So I would say that's when I started realizing that science was a big interest of mine.
A fun thing about this podcast is when we have our guests come on and they start talking about their early experiences, so many times I'm like, that makes so much sense for who they are now. And this is one of those moments, Sue. It just makes so much sense. You teaching all of the kids in the neighborhood. I love it. And setting up little dioramas. It's fantastic. Now, there has to be, so those are like more, on your own. You guys were doing a lot of exploration and play. Can we talk a little bit more about the formal education experiences? Were there any classes or moments in school that led you to where you are today? Sue, would you like to start?
Classes or moments in school that led me to where I am today. I would say that I took traditional science classes in high school and then took great pains to pursue more science classes in college and after college. And I spent a lot of time in graduate school exploring different areas of science and doing field work wherever possible so that I could really understand from the science perspective as well as translate that to the teacher's perspective and creating an experience for students in the classroom, the most authentic experience that was possible for them.
And Nicole, what about you?
Well, I had the opportunity to, since I grew up in a university town in Athens, Ohio University, I was able to take classes as a high school student and get exposed earlier. And I took geology and I took anthropology and I took some plant identification classes as well. So that got me exposed young. And then I pursued an education in plant biology at Ohio University, which offered a lot of different classes in my area of interest. So definitely the college experience had a big influence in me deciding what I was going to major in. And I really thrived in a social learning environment. I really enjoyed learning with other students, and it was very motivating for me. And I got very active in it. And I also explored internships. I was able to work in the greenhouse for quite a while, and that exposed me to the hands-on. And the hands-on piece of working with plants really helped me decide that that's what I really wanted to pursue my graduate work in. So for sure, the formal education had a huge influence on my decision.
Can you talk a little bit, too, about how I know that your experiences in kind of, getting a wide range of science courses and then being able to kind of really hone in and specialize in the areas that you were most passionate about. Can you talk with us about your decision to kind of move from research to conservation leadership and kind of why you decided that path over the other?
So in as an undergraduate, I was in environmental plant biology, and then I decided to go to grad school for horticulture. And when I entered the horticulture program, I was fortunate enough to have the ability to kind of choose my own way because the way my fellowship was set up, I was able to choose my own direction. And I really wanted to study native species, and I wanted to do it in a very applied way. So I was very interested in looking at more landscape scale restoration. I was also very attuned to the issues and the challenges that we were having globally with loss of biodiversity and a lot of disturbance happening. So I wanted to play into that. I wanted my work to mean something and to be able to be applied directly to a landscape space where we could make improvements to the landscape and actually promote biodiversity. I was really interested, connecting again to the pets and the animals that I like so much. How do we make plant systems that promote a place for wildlife to be? And so that's what got me started along that direction. I really just wanted to be more hands-on, and I wanted to do something that would translate into solutions for improving our connection and ability to support biodiversity.
It's great hearing about how you really made a career your own based on your interests, both in animals and plants, but also with your desire to make the world a better place. And I think that's something that's really, really important and crucial for our listeners to hear is that, you can have all these different influences shaping where you're going in life, and you just need to have the vision to understand that that's the direction you're going to be heading. So, but we'll talk more about that in a minute. Now, Sue, you have a strong background in K through 12 education. How has that influenced the programs that you help drive to educate youth about plants and trees?
So my background in education has been interesting in that I was always very interested in how and why people learn. So I also have a background in psychology, and I use that when I think about how do you measure the effect of learning in a way that tells you that you have impact. And so another influence from my education background is that besides a concentration in science, I had a concentration in social science and math and language arts as well. So all of you throw all of those together, you can create real life situations for which people can respond to. And I used to say this when I was teaching science to my students. When you watch TV, you don't turn a channel and say, and now it's time for social studies, and now it's time for math. Everything comes together naturally in life. So I tried to do my best back when I was teaching to present problems that were grounded in real world rather than isolated problems that you wouldn't normally see in the real world. So I think those are big influencers on me as I think about our future and our youth and plants and trees and getting people connected to those things. Because I think what's great about teaching science specifically about plants and trees is it's tangible. Kids can feel like they have an influence on their community, and that's related to social studies. And it's related to other things as well. So I think that is a key driver for me when I think about driving programs forward.
It's wonderful to listen to both of you talk about, Nicole, but you talk about how you wanted to, really have an impact and make a difference on the world in a sense. And that's part of the reason that drove you to conservation, of having more a hands-on approach. And Sue, similarly, having a hands-on approach to how people learn and having that understanding so that, in teaching, you can have an impact on your students. And then now in the programs and educational offerings, those can have an impact on visitors as well. I would imagine that you, as part of both your roles, you're in, decision-making responsibilities as vice presidents, and you, in order to be successful, you need to utilize vision and strategy regularly in your job, which is what we're excited to talk with you about today. But could each of you tell us about vision and what it means to you in your position? And Sue, we had you start last time, so Nicole will give you a chance to start this time.
Sure. So we're talking about vision. Yeah. Well, this is when you're yes, now I have a lot of responsibility and a lot of decision making that I have to do. But I didn't know that this was going to be my path, just to be clear. I mean, I never really set out to say I want to be a leader of an institution. That was not what was motivating me. I mostly really cared about I really cared about biodiversity. I've always cared about really trying to get people to be connected more with the life around them, because I think we're happier, we're better off, we're better people, we're happier when we are more in touch with our natural world. That was one of the driving forces, has always been for me. And so as I was going along in my career path, and when I was at an institution before the Morton Arboretum called the Wilds, things just needed to be done. There would be opportunities that would come up, and it would require someone to step up and take a lead on something, or someone to be willing to take ownership of something, or being willing to take a risk to make something move forward. And so I was always motivated to do that, because I wanted to see the work that I was doing. I wanted it to be recognized as important, and that other people would see that also as important. So that's what led me to where I am now, is just my desire to want to make a difference. So now in my role, it's important, being a vice president at the Arboretum, we're a large organization. There's a lot of people working in many different arenas, and it's important that we have a vision for the future so we can bring everybody along. And so visioning is really about looking ahead at what is that desired state? What is most important to us as a community, to us as an organization, and figuring out how to get everyone to work together on that. So it's not something that a vision isn't something necessarily I'm doing, but I'm listening for it to try to distill it down into what we are saying. So it's not really my vision. It's really more of the vision of the whole that I'm trying to understand and articulate so that we can all be on the same page. So visioning is a process, and it actually uses a lot of scientific training that you pick up in your schooling in the scientific method, because you have a hypothesis about the future, right? And then you think through that, and then you check your assumptions, you check everything, and then you come back to, okay, where am I right now? Where are we right now in this place? And if we want to go there, how are we going to get there? So it's definitely a process.
Well, I appreciated when you said that vision means that you're all on the same page. And I have to say, for the listeners, our vice presidents here are very much on the same page, because Sue Wagner was smiling and nodding to a lot of that. So, but I would hope that you'd like to elaborate more and tell us your perspective inside of things. So, Sue, do you mind cueing us in on some of your thoughts?
Well, sure. And Nicole, wow, thank you for expressing what the vision is. And I share many of Nicole's ways of thinking about vision. I think it is about finding your place in what you're interested in, and saying, okay, how can I have an impact with others and achieving something that's bigger than us? And that's what I think about when I think of vision. And then, if you know me, you'll hear me talk about impact all the time. And when you talk about impact, it means you're thinking about how do you know you're successful? Mm-hmm. And it means there's a whole lot out there in the world to choose from. If we think about plants and trees, there's all kinds of things we can do, all kinds of activities we can do to help make the world a more beautiful, healthier place. We have to choose carefully. We have to say which activities are going to give us the biggest impact, the biggest bang for our buck, in order for us to move forward and have an impact on the world. So
the whole is better. The whole is better than the single individual.
Yes.
And an organization like the Morton Arboretum, we're trying to have an impact as a whole. So if everybody there is very intelligent and incredible in what they do, but if everybody just sort of did their own thing, where would that lead us? We can go so much farther if we all aligned ourselves to say, this is what we want to do as a community. And that's what we try to do as leaders, is really not necessarily tell people what the vision, but listen for that vision and really figure out what it is that we can all become aligned on, and then bring us all together. And so it really is a process in that. It definitely doesn't come to you like overnight. You don't just wake up and say, here's our vision. I had a dream. I mean, some people do work that way, but when you're working in an organization like ours, it really is a community effort.
I think listening is a key piece of vision and leadership. It's really taking in all of the information, looking for evidence of, is my hypothesis true or false, and saying, all right, you know what, we're all seeing the evidence, now let's move forward together. I think to me that kind of culminates vision.
So I'm glad you both mentioned listening, because it kind of relates to one of the next things that we're going to talk about. You both lead really large teams. And as a result of that, I would imagine you have to do a lot of listening to make sure that, collectively everyone is moving towards the same goal, and also, is being heard in what their needs are, so that collectively we can have a large impact. Can you talk a little bit about how that big picture mentality of keeping the vision in mind while listening to everybody that are working toward it, how that allows you to see strengths in others, and kind of how you utilize listening to your teams as part of the visioning process?
How we do that? Well, it happens in different ways. I was thinking even today, Nicole and I met with our colleagues at work, and we were really listening to each other as we're thinking about the next phase of our organization moving forward. And you have to be still, and you have to think about the other person's perspective. And as a leader at the Arboretum, I count on staff, wonderful staff, who have access to different communities, different learners, different experiences. And I say, hey, what have you learned? What did you learn? What did you hear? What kind of trends are you seeing? And understanding that each person on the team has different strengths to bring to the table, has different insights to bring to the table, and that's what makes us a stronger organization overall.
Yeah, it's a lot of communicating, a lot of conversations. So that's mostly what I do now as a vice president. I used to be in the field a lot and collecting data, and making observations and taking that. And now it's using similar thought process and similar training. I use the training that I have, that I accumulated over time, but it's more now about understanding people and listening to people, and then distilling that down into something that can be communicated broadly or to a specific audience. So, we have a board that has to be aligned too. So we've got a board to align, then we also have a whole group of staff to align. And that takes a lot of listening and a lot of talking, and a lot of different meetings to be able to do that. So meetings are not necessarily a waste of time, right? You have to be able to communicate with people and have those dialogues.
One thing that I think's really striking that both of you guys were talking about is how important the scientific process is for the vision process. You have to make observations. You have to, you make your hypotheses. You revisit the data. You check your assumptions. It's just really cool to see how these skills that, you learn in school, you hone over time, can really be beneficial and impact so many different areas of your life and the skill set. So it's just really cool to hear, and just it's those things it's those skills that you add to your life that can only benefit you over time. Well, we recently had teachers participate in an on-site workshop, and we showed them your profiles, and we asked them, what would you like to know from these fantastic leaders? And they had some questions, so we're going to jump into some of those. Nicole, their question for you was, you've been able to travel a bunch in your career, so what's been one of the most memorable experiences in your travels?
Traveling has been, I've always enjoyed traveling since I was very young. I still do. I learn a lot. I love to travel because you get a different perspective of the world, and it's also a great time to think and work through some of these things that get in your head. But hey, I was thinking this morning about our trip to China. So I've been going to China at least I think I've been there 9 times since I've been at the Arboretum, because we are, we have a close relationship with China, and we wanted to develop our global programs in line with Chinese colleagues. So we've been working both on the conservation end as well as the scientific end with China, and also on the education front. And one of the things that we wanted to do with our Chinese counterparts in the botanical garden world is work towards improving children's gardens, right? China is really on this path of really wanting to get children exposed to nature at a young age, and botanical gardens are a great place to have that interaction with kids. And so Sue and I worked together on a workshop a few years ago. We were in Hunan province and worked together on a workshop for a children's garden. And there are a lot of different gardens from China that came together. And it was a couple, 2 very, very intense days of conversation around children's gardens. And then they wanted to reward us. And they said, we're going to take you somewhere and thank you for all your time. And we had no idea where we were going. We had sandals on, and they're like, yeah. And then they took us to this place called Zhangjiajie.
Yeah.
And this is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, by the way, in Hunan province. So it's like an amazing, amazing place. Now, it was really cloudy and rainy that day.
And mountainous.
Oh, no. But we walked for like 8 hours.
Oh, my God.
In our sandals. And
in the rain.
And
pouring rain.
Through this amazing place that they had. And it was really memorable.
Lots of blisters, lots of Band-Aids.
Oh, my gosh.
Lots of walking.
Imagine.
But it was really cool. And
it was a lot of fun.
And, they didn't really tell us where they were taking us, but they took us as a reward for helping out on this workshop, and it was really fun. So that was a very memorable experience. And Sue and I happened to be together on that one. So
Oh, that's nice.
It was great. It was great.
Some of the perks of the job there, right?
Yeah.
Sue, I'm excited to ask you this question that is also from our teacher audience, also because we both share a background in moving from the formal classroom setting to the non-formal realm. But they were looking for some advice for someone who's looking to kind of move into an informal educational sphere. And what advice would you like to share with them?
Oh, gosh. That's an interesting question. I think when I was teaching, I was very open to new opportunities. And whenever I saw opportunities to engage in leadership, whether it's through NSTA, National Science Teachers Association, or other organizations, I took advantage of that. Because what I was trying to do is get a bigger picture outside my classroom and stay connected to thought leaders who were thinking differently about science education more specifically. And when I look at my training, my science education training, as well as psychology training, I see what really has transcended all of my experiences is being able to think critically and use scientific habits of mind. Mm-hmm. It's really important to hang on to those and apply those in your work. And Megan, you know about backward design and the methodology we use to design programs. You start with what impact do you want to have on your students and kind of work backward from there. That still works really well when you're developing a strategy. It's essentially you're thinking about your hypothesis and your assumptions and the inputs and outputs and all of the other factors that weigh into creating an experience or a product or an impact that has deep meaning. So I would give other teachers the strong advice to be very open to new opportunities and question how they're teaching and whether it has impact and stay in touch and in tune with leadership.
I think that's wonderful advice also because if you take opportunities that are, a little bit outside your comfort zone or teaching things in a, with that mindfulness, you don't realize the skill set that you're building at that time that leads to more opportunities for you or different opportunities in the field, because essentially, I would, as a former teacher and as an educator myself, we're all lifelong learners. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's true of, a lot of individuals, but I think that that's definitely an important part of the process.
Yes, lifelong learner over here, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Now, for both of you, you're in senior leadership at a large museum. I mean, we have 1.3 million visitors a year. It has to be a really unique opportunity. Can you talk a little bit more about what your day-to-day is like? Because it's got to be very different than a lot of other places.
Well, gosh, Nicole and I started our day together today, if we want to think about day-to-day.
8:30 meeting.
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock meeting.
8 o'clock. And it's early. So strategic meeting. We're thinking about how we want to engage our board of trustees in our strategic planning. And from there, in my day, I have an artist here from out of town, actually from South Africa, who we're hoping to work with on a future large-scale exhibition. Other things happen in the day, like here we are doing this podcast, and I might be editing materials. I might be providing insight into a particular experience we're thinking about. I might be working with anybody on a particular program and providing insight there. I'm working with my colleagues on a number of initiatives, but it's an interesting day to day. It all depends on what day it is. It could be different, and it could be the same. It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
I realize that one of the most important things that I put into play on a daily basis is learning how to prioritize moment to moment. So there's always more on the list that you need to do than you have time for. So it's always about prioritizing, and you have to be able to make those decisions quickly. It's not always comfortable because you're weighing what's more important, but you learn pretty quickly how to make those decisions so that, and it's not about what you want. Here's the thing about being a leader. It's not about what you want. It's about, because believe me, if it was just what I wanted, I'd be like, I think it's time to go smell those flowers outside. Sometimes I do that. But it's really about, okay, what do we need as an institution right now? I mean, you're really not thinking about necessarily what your desires are so much as what the institution needs from you. Okay, so, it's weighing. So when media opportunities come up, right, that's really important. That's now. If we have until noon to answer a call from somebody who wants to do an interview, well, that's something that you have to turn around really quickly, and you put that in front of other things. There's often big questions that come across, like how do I handle this problem? And there's a lot of problem solving and developing quick solutions to things. And then there's ongoing meetings and trying to stay on a course of planning. There's always a seasonal planning at play at a garden, and so we're trying to stay on top with that as well, because we have, of course, different seasons of the year bring different opportunities and different challenges. So it is variable. It's not boring. Never, ever boring. No. There's always something to do.
No, it's not boring. And one thing that's constant is our vision and our strategic plan. Mm-hmm. But what's not constant is the popcorn of activities. Like everything's just popping around us all the time, and we have to adjust and say what's the highest priority and what's good for the institution.
Mm-hmm. Well, Nicole, I know you mentioned that occasionally, you do make it a priority to get out and smell the flowers.
Especially in my garden.
And related to that, we have one last question for both of you. And
it's
a tough one, but it is related to maybe which plants you like to go out and visit most, or have a favorite. Can you tell us what your favorite plant is? And Nicole, we'll let you start first.
Yeah, that's really rough. I hate this question. But I understand that you got to have a story around it. And so I will give you an answer, but just know it's really difficult for me to answer, especially after going outside yesterday and seeing all the amazing trees and all the plants. I was just in glory. So it was it changes every day. But I have a particular tree that I really like, and it is it's really a dinosaur tree because it hasn't changed for millions of years, and I think that's cool. So that would be the tulip tree, Liriodendron, and literally in Greek that means tulip tree, Liriodendron. So it is a literal translation from Greek, and it is a beautiful tree that's native, and it can grow very tall. and very straight and has these amazing leaves that are very, very unique, very easy to identify. But the flower is really cool. So it's in the magnolia family. And magnolias are evolutionarily a very old lineage of trees. And the liriodendron is like a living fossil. Like literally, the genome hasn't changed for millions of years. So it's like going back in time. It's really cool. There's a similar species in China, Liriodendron chinensis. And then we have Liriodendron tulipifera. So, but genetically, they're different. They look morphologically very, very similar, and you're like, it's the same tree. But then you look at the genetics, nope, they're different species. So there's a lot of stories around it. So it's not only beautiful, but it has a really interesting evolutionary story to it. It's a tree that you could plant in your backyard, especially in a protected area, because it's marginally hardy in northeastern Illinois, but pretty hardy in Ohio, where I grew up. And the blossom is fantastic and beautiful. And I've even painted it before because I like it so much.
I love their leaves. We call it the kitty cat tree because the leaves look like a little cat with the little ears. So
yeah, that is kind of a kitty cat tree.
And it is a indicator species for American ginseng. Just going to throw that out there right now.
That's a good one.
And Sue, what about you? What is your favorite plant?
So when I think about plants, I think about how they make me feel and how they make others feel. And so I would say my go-to plant is lavender because of its ethnobotanic.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Love it.
Essence. It's very calming. It's peaceful. The color's beautiful. It's a very approachable plant and can be enjoyed by young and old. So I really like lavender.
Both just fantastic choices. You really can't go wrong with plants, though, right? Just thank you so much for being here today, Sue and Nicole, talking with us. You know, I think some of the things that really struck home for me is how important that scientific thinking and critical thinking, all that training that you've had throughout your life, how you apply that to all these different areas. And the other thing that I really appreciate is just how you guys are great examples of strong women in leadership roles in a really unique position at a very large museum. And, you know, you're really not only shaping the future of the institution right now with all that you're doing for strategic planning, but all your work with education and, you know, science and conservation that goes on there. You're really shaping the future of trees for the world. So thank you so much for being here and for your wonderful comments and talking today.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing this podcast. I hope people enjoy it and learn something from it.
This episode of Planted, Finding Your Roots in STEM Careers was made possible by the Morton Arboretum and the Multimedia Services at College of DuPage. Check out additional resources and bonus content at www.mortonarb.org/plantedpodcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, like, and share, and let us know what you think. This is Jessica Turner-Scuff
And Megan Wiesbrod.
and we hope you'll continue to join us as we journey into STEM careers.